Hey everyone, change of scenery here. Kind of nice. That was the classic and unmistakable pair of solos to Heartbreaker by Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin. From the album Led Zeppelin 2, coming in at number 16 on Guitar World Magazine's Top 100 Solos of All Time. Now, about a year ago, I covered the absolutely wonderful blues solo from Since I've Been Loving You, also by Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin, which was at number 52 or 53, somewhere around there. Can't quite remember right now. And afterwards, in my little chat, I took on the somewhat common opinion and misconception, in my opinion, that Jimmy Page was a sloppy guitar player and soloist. Basically stating vehemently that he was certainly no such thing. I also stated that before Led Zeppelin, Jimmy was one of the most sought-after studio session players in the world, and that studios most definitely don't seek out sloppy session players. Just the opposite, in fact. So with that said, sure, I'll concede that maybe live, when he was completely wasted on either drugs or alcohol, or usually both, he could certainly get sloppy. Who wouldn't? But I also ascertained that I couldn't think of many recorded examples from their numerous albums whereas Jimmy played sloppily. Well, I'll state now that in that regard, I have to eat my words because I was wrong. I was wrong because, well, Heartbreaker. One only has to listen to the first unaccompanied solo in Heartbreaker to hear the sloppiness in it. But I'm of the mind that it was completely on purpose, that it's exactly what Jimmy was going for. An unaccompanied solo break that was nothing but 45 seconds of loose, barely controlled ferocity and chaos. You can easily hear the contrast between the two solos. When you listen to the first solo and listen to the second solo, there's a vast difference between the two. The second solo is not sloppy at all, and there's sections in the second solo that are just as fast as the first solo. So like I said, I'm convinced that it was exactly what he was going for. And sloppy or not, Jimmy certainly hit his mark and created one of the most memorable and famous solos of all time, with the somewhat sloppy, unaccompanied first half of the solo, which is actually the much more famous of the two solos in Heartbreaker. That said, it was a solo that was almost not a part of the song at all in the beginning. You see, the song was finished. It was recorded. It was headed for mixing, along with the rest of the band's second album, when Jimmy Page sat down and decided to re-listen to Heartbreaker a number of times. Though he couldn't quite put his finger on it, something was missing to Jimmy's ear. Something that would draw the listener in, and something that would raise the intensity of the song to another level, I suppose. And since, like I said, the tune was already finished, recorded and headed for mixing, his options to make changes were very limited. But maybe there was a way to insert a new section somewhere in the middle of the song. Maybe. After pondering over the different possibilities of how to do this, Page picked up a 1959 Les Paul guitar, plugged it into a Marshall amp the very first time that he would use this famous combination, and that he himself would become quite famous for going forward, and proceeded to record one of the most famous guitar solos of all time. Thus its inclusion on this list, I suppose. According to Page, he put down 3 or 4 quick takes, picked the best of the bunch, and spliced it into the already complete song. The unaccompanied section of the solo, which lasts all of about 48 seconds, is absolutely jam-packed with a multitude of Jimmy's characteristic improvisational soloing techniques. One of those techniques is Page's ability to switch between major and minor scale tonalities, which creates lovely contrasts during his playing and his improvisations. Speaking of scales, the first half of the Heartbreaker solo is based around the A minor blues scale, which relates to the tune's A minor D chord progression. And he basically sticks to the minor pentatonic in that. In the second half, he uses the A major blues scale, and that pretty much becomes the focus of his melodic soloing lines. Though he doesn't really mix the two, the major and minor, within the same solo bits. It was a common thing that Jimmy did, mixing major and minor. Another one of my favorite guitar players, Dickie Betts of the Allman Brothers Band, did this a lot as well. But anyway, the intro solo, like I said, it's exactly what he was going for. I'm convinced. While the whole solo is fantastic and considered a classic amongst Led Zeppelin fans and guitarists alike, there is one little short section at 2 minutes and 8 seconds on the studio version that kind of changed the course of music history in a way that even Jimmy Page couldn't have imagined. Those 7 seconds of music featured his behind the nut bends, these trills that he's doing with these. I'm not plugged in, but you can probably hear it. Word has it that after seeing Jimmy Page perform this solo live in 1971, a young Eddie Van Halen began experimenting with using both hands on the fretboard to recreate Page's behind the nut bends. Eddie found that if he played the bent notes with the right hand instead of up here, by tapping his hand on the neck, he would create a movable nut with his left hand. And so then he could move it all over the fretboard. And that discovery led to the development of his famous two-hand tapping technique, or so they say, which can be heard on practically everything Eddie Van Halen ever did. I don't know if that's true. Some say that Eddie Van Halen did not invent this, that he stole it from someone else, and that it's been going on since the 50s. Who knows? But, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. So anyway, another interesting little story before I leave about this song. Heartbreaker was one of the most famous songs Led Zeppelin ever produced. And after they recorded it, it became a part of every single live performance going forward throughout the 70s. Sometimes as an opening song, sometimes as an encore, but it was always there. And it was, and the middle part being a good place for Jimmy to put his guitar solo for the night. An interesting thing is that its companion piece, Living Loving Maid, which starts almost immediately after Heartbreaker finishes on the studio album, making it very much almost like a continuation of the same song, was never played live. And I found that quite interesting because it's almost like they're one continuous song, even though, it does become a different song. But anyway, I found that interesting that they never played Living Loving Maid live. So anyway, that's all I got to say about that one. Great classic solo, and, sloppy or not, it's still fantastic and deserving of its spot within the top 20 on this list, I think. So anyway, you guys take care of yourselves. I hope you enjoyed my take on that one. And hope you're well in your little guitar corner of the world. I've been locked in my apartment for the past week with a 4-year-old and my wife. And so I've had to change my scenery here because I disturbed them. Little music for you there. I don't know what that is. My phone just started playing music. But anyway, you guys take care of yourselves. Ciao.